In the sweltering summer of July 1518, the streets of Strasbourg, a city then under the Holy Roman Empire, became the stage for one of the strangest, most terrifying spectacles in recorded history. A story so bizarre, so unsettling, that even today scholars struggle to explain it. It was not a plague of rats, nor a plague of boils, nor even the dread Black Death. No, this was something else, a plague of movement, a plague of dance. Imagine it, the air thick with heat, the city burdened with hunger and disease, and in the middle of it all, one woman began to sway. At first, it seems harmless, perhaps even whimsical, but within hours, her body jerks uncontrollably. Her arms flail, her feet pound the cobblestones in a rhythm no one else can hear. Days pass, yet she does not stop. She cannot stop. This was not a performance. It was not a celebration. It was the beginning of the dancing plague. Starbucks in the year 1518 was a city already drawing in a misery. The people were suffocating under the weight of famine. Harsh winters had destroyed crops, leading to hunger that gnawed at every home. Disease stalked the streets as outbreaks of smallpox and tuberculosis lingered in the shadows. The church whispered the gods' wrath was upon them, while other beliefs, demons roamed freely, preying upon human souls. Superstition was not just common, it was survival. The political climate was equally unstable. Starbucks was ruled by a city council, but their authority often clashed with religious leaders. In this world of uncertainty, fear and faith intervened. Every misfortune was seen as divine punishment, every sickness as witchcraft or sin. And in July of that year, amid this fragile society, something unthinkable occurred, a mystery that would baffle history for centuries to come. It all began with a woman. History remembers her only as Frotofia. On a hot July morning, she stepped into the narrow streets of Strasbourg and began to dance. At first, the neighbors watched in confusion. Perhaps she was mocking, perhaps celebrating, but soon their curiosity turned into horror. Protofia did not stop. Hours passed, sweat dripped from her face, her body trembled, yet her legs moved with a force beyond her control. She danced through the day, she danced through the night, and when the sun rose again, she was still moving. Her feet raw, her muscles spasm, her eyes glazed in torment. Witnesses said she appeared trapped, like a puppet, whose strings were pulled by unseen hands. This was not joy, it was agony, a dance that brought not celebration, only fear. Her husband, desperate and ashamed, pleaded with her to stop, but she could not hear him. The rhythm consumed her. By the end of the week, Protofia's strange affliction had spread. Dozens of townspeople were struck by the same curse. Men and women, young and old, began to twist and spin uncontrollably, their bodies jacking in grotesque rhythm. Within days, nearly 30 people had joined this unholy dance. The streets filled with the sound of shuffling feet, gasping breaths, and cries of pains. The dancers collapsed from exhaustion, only to rise again, as though compelled by some invisible force. And still, no one understood why. Was it divine punishment, mass hysteria, or something darker, something supernatural? By the second week, the number of dancers had grown to over 100. Starbucks' narrow lanes turned into open-air stages of suffering. People stumbled, bled, and fainted, yet continued to move. Some broke their ribs, others shattered their bones. A few danced under the life drained out of them. The plague was no longer as curiosity, it was a nightmare unraveling before the eyes of the city. The city of Strasbourg was in chaos, but began with a single woman had now inflicted dozens, and soon hundreds. The council, overwhelmed and terrified, scrambled for answers. Was this madness sent by God, or had the devil himself come to dance in their streets? Strasbourg's city council, a group of wealthy elites who governed the city, was deeply concerned. At first, they turned to physicians, they learned men of the age. But their explanation was as strange as the affliction itself. According to the doctors, this was no curse, nor demonic possessions. Instead, they declared it a natural illness, caused, they said, by overheated blood. The cure? More dancing? The physicians believed that if the afflicted simplicity danced the sickness out of their systems, they would eventually recover. And so, the council took an extraordinary step. They cleared guild halls, opened grain markets, even built wooden stages, encouraging the dancers to continue. Believing this would bring relief, musicians were hired, drummers, pipers, and fiddlers filled the streets. The sick, trembling, half-dead citizens were given an audience. What follows was grotesque. The streets of Strasbourg echoed with relentless music and the sound of hundreds of tortured bodies moving in forced rhythm. The dancers collapsed, foaming to the mouth, their feet torn to shreds, their eyes wide with terror. Yet the music played on, and they rose again. Day after day, the nightmare grew worse. By August, more than 400 souls were consumed by the plague. People died of heart attacks, strokes, and exhaustions, and still the council clung to physicians' theory until the death toll could no longer be ignored. Finally, when medicines failed, the city turned to faith. The clergy declared this was no illness at all, but a punishment from Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers. His wrath, they claimed, had cursed Strasbourg. And so, the council ordered the dancers to be taken to a shrine of Saint Vitus, miles away, where priests prayed over them and sprinkled holy water. Slowly the plague begins to fade, but the damage had already been done. Scores were dead, and the city scared by a mystery it could not explain. Years have passed since that summer of terror, and yet the mystery remains. What truly caused the dancing plague of 1518? Historians, scientists have debated endlessly. Was it a curse, a sickness, or something far stranger? One of the most famous explanations is bread. In the 16th century, Strasbourg's people relied heavily on grain, and rye, when infected with a certain fungus, produced a substance called agate. Agate is a powerful hallucinogen, the very chemical later used to create LSD. Consuming it can cause convulsion, spasm, and hallucinogen. Could the dancers have been poisons? Could hundreds of people unknowingly have eaten tainted bread that drove their bodies into madness? It sounds convincing until you look closer. Agate poisoning usually cripples its victims. Their muscles lock, their limbs spasm violently, but they do not dance for days and weeks. And entire cities are not confected at once. Perhaps agate played a role, but it does not explain everything. Another possibility is psychological. Strasbourg in 1518 was a city drawing in misery, famine, disease, and endless fear. People lived in constant dread of God's wrath, the devil's hand, and the end of days. In such conditions, mass hysteria is not only possible, it is almost inevitable. Historians believe the people of Strasbourg may have suffered a collective psychosis, a stress-induced trance that spread like fire. When one woman began to dance, others, already broken by hunger and fear, unconsciously limited her. Soon the city was trapped in a chain reaction of terror. Their minds betrayed them, and their bodies followed. This explanation fits, and yet it does not account for the death, for the broken ribs, for the people who dance themselves to death. And then there is faith. In the medieval world, people believed in saints, curses, and miracles with absolute certainty. Saint Vitus, in particular, was feared for punishing sinners by cursing them with uncontrollable dancing. The church preached that Strasbourg had angered the saint, and the only way to stop the plague was through pilgrimage and prayer. Indeed, when the afflicted with marched to the shrine of Saint Vitus, the dancing began to fade. Coincidence or something more? Even today, some whisper that plague ended not because of science, not because of faith. Perhaps it was all these things: a poisonous bread, a fragile mind, and a desperate faith tangled together in one horrifying summer. Or perhaps it was something we'll never understand. For the truth is this: the dancing plague of 1588 was not the first time such madness occurred, nor would be the last. The Strasbourg outbreak of 1518 was the most infamous, but it was not unique. Across medieval Europe, stories of uncontrollable dancing surfaced again and again, dark echoes of a mystery that refused to die. As early as the 7th century, in the Rhine Valley, groups of people were said to be cursed by Saint Vitus, forced to leap and twist until they collapsed. In 1237, a group of children in Erfurt, Germany, were reported to have danced compulsively through the streets, their bodies within until they fell unconscious. In Aachen, in 1374, the madness swept across the city like wildfire. Thousands were seen dancing in the streets, crying out in the pain, screaming for mercy, their feet bleeding as a priest dragged them away. The plague spread through towns along the Rhine, sparkling terror across Europe, and then, like a shadow, it vanished. The dancing plague of Strasbourg was simply the last and largest in the chain of unexplainable horrors. Historians today look back at Strasbourg as a cautionary tale. It reminds us how fragile the human mind can be, especially in time of fear and suffering. Some believe it was agate poisoning, others see it is a mass hysteria, but none can explain why people would dance until their ribs cracked, their lungs burst, and their heart failed. The dancing plague remains a symbol of the darkness that lurks at the edge of human understanding. It is history's cruel reminder that sometimes reality is stranger than myth. Picture it, the summer sun beating down on the cobblestone of Strasbourg, hundreds of bodies swaying, stumbling, collapsing, only to rise again. Music echoing through the streets, priests chanting prayers, doctors scribbling nonsense, and families watching in helpless terror. For weeks, the city became a theater of the damned, and then as suddenly it began. It ended, the dancers fell silent, the music stopped, the street emptied. But the question remained: why did they dance? What force gripped their bodies, their minds, their souls? Was it hunger? Was it madness? Was it God? Or was it something else? Something we will never dare to name. 5 centuries later, the mystery endures. The dances of Strasbourg are long gone, yet their footsteps still echoes through history. And if you listen closely on a hot summer night, you might still hear them fade out with eerie, haunting music.